Hey everybody, welcome back to my chat. Today we've got a special guest. We're going to be interviewing CharlieKitty, who is a co-author in a book called Taken, but I will let her tell you more about that. If you have questions, please feel free to post them on chat. YouTube is up and functioning. We do have a chat box and stuff, so we'll be able to see, but we're not using the old chat box that combines your chat, so I can see your YouTube chat, but it won't be on stream. If you're interested in joining the stream and having your stuff show up, come over to Twitch. All right, let's jump right into meeting CharlieKitty. You guys ready? Hi, Charlie. I don't think we can hear you. Hold on.
Oh.
There we go. Yep, we got you.
You hear me now?
I can.
Okay, good.
So, thanks for doing the interview. This is going to be a lot of fun, right? I normally do these privately and then just kind of edit and go with the video and do all kinds of stuff. But this time we're just going to go live stream. And you're a live streamer as well, right?
Yes, I am.
And what's your Twitch or
Twitch
YouTube?
My Twitch and YouTube are the same thing. It's Melusine, but with a 5 instead of an S. Let me go ahead and I can drop that in the... I'm dropping it in the YouTube.
Sounds good. If it doesn't show up, I can drop it myself. I might
so that
have,
one's my Twitch, and my YouTube should be the same thing.
I might have a bot blocking thing. We'll see. I'll throw it up too on my end. Here we go. Yeah, there. All right, you ready to start this interview? I'm kind of a bit nervous. It's been a while since I've done one.
I'll do my Twitter. Oh wait, nope, I deleted Twitter. There we go. Yep, that's there's a bot.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of things. I'm not going to turn on closed caption either. I know you guys like closed caption, but I'm not going to turn that on this time. We're just going to run straight stream. So, okay. So, are you ready to start this interview and go with the flow of it?
Ready.
Okay. So I have some questions here to help me prep for stuff, but really we'll just go with the flow and see how things are going. Oh, there we go. I see your chat now.
I tried.
Would you mind doing a quick intro about the story and what it is that you've been writing with the traffic story?
Well, I introduce the story.
Don't smoke, it's real bad for you. Okay, well, that's all right. That's all right. The way it's come off to me is that it's sort of come off as a horror thriller romance sort of thing. And
that's what.
Go ahead.
That's what I described it to people who have read it. Like I've shared it with my spouse and my roommate, and I'm like, it's a smut story, but it's romantic. It's a romantic thriller. Like,
it's for sure one of the closest romance novel like stories that I have ever written. I've written a lot of stories, and as a co-author to this one, this is very romance novel. This is the sort of thing that I could imagine easily picking up in a story. It's really followed a pretty linear idea that's got lots of branches and lots of ideas and lots of different elements, but it's very grounded in reality.
A lot of the stories that I'm used to writing, and if you've read anything that I've written before, a lot of them, I only have one actual romance other than this one. And that was the one that I first started, story I ever started doing, that sharing with people. But everything else I've written, it's been a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi. So this is probably the more like closest thing to slice of life that I do have.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself then?
Well, I live in the Midwest. I'm married. I have 3 cats. And I am currently have a job where like I get a lot of time where I can write and have my other hobbies. I do music as well, so
The life, man. If you have a job where you can write, that's the life.
Yep.
What drives you to kind of write these stories that you do? What's your driving factor? I guess some people refer to it as a muse. What would you say your muse is?
Like the thing that like makes me want to write these things is like everything, like all of the stuff I write generally has some darker aspects to it, and I think some of it's just like my favorite thing to write is generally horrible people getting along and like learning to live together, and this is one of the ones where I actually branched a little bit out of my comfort zone.
How's that?
And so
Okay. Do you have like a writing schedule, something where you write between this hour and this hour where you're able to get so much done?
no, I just usually I try to like set like a schedule where I have a time where I don't write, because that's more my issue. Is if I have the free time, usually I'll be downstairs playing piano, playing guitar, writing. So I actually have to schedule time away from the computer to be able to make room for other stuff. So Monday nights are my nights off.
Very cool. In your bio, you've represented yourself as a non-binary, and I guess with everything going on around the world, has that influenced or in any way related to your characters?
I don't have any non-binary characters at the moment. I have, like, I've kicked around the idea. I never really had any stories that fit with them, so I haven't tried it. I think it makes it easier for me to be able to write male characters when I do have them. It's kind of rare. I have only done a few stories where I've played males as the main character, but I think it helps me be able to get into that space a little bit easier.
Cool. Is there any specific like traditions that you do when you write? Like for me, when I write, I need to grab coffee, I need to have a cigarette, I need to have fans going and some music in the background. Anything like that for you?
I have character playlists. So every character I have for a story that I've gotten really into, where it's taken off, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to finish like this or like get it pretty far, I build a character playlist based upon the characters that I am trying to write. For Trafficked, actually, I have a playlist for Alex, and then I also have one where like it's for the story itself, where any music that has been used for scene music or anything I've put into a playlist where sometimes I'll just listen to it before I make a post.
Very cool. In this story, you're playing a Filipino woman who's had a really difficult life, and to start, she's sort of started with this difficult life, and there's a lot of internal conflicts going on with her, and there's a lot of depth there. What drove your character concept, and is there a reason that you chose to play a Filipino?
No. I wanted to be able to do a character where they have a history of generational trauma. So it's like because her mother had her at a young age, and then her grandparents were immigrants. So I wanted to be able to have a character who was a first or second generation person into America, because she grew up in poverty, but her family, until they moved out, were very close knit. And I am not Filipino, I'm Quahati, and my other half of my family's Jewish. So while I'm not that ethnicity, there's similar backgrounds there.
Cool. Let's see. We're burning through my questions super fast. You really have a very complex and deep history of writing complex characters. I noticed with some of your other stories, your characters are equally complex, and I was wondering what kind of inspires that realism and complexity. Instead of just kind of having a baseline character, you get a lot of depth into stuff that most people just don't think about.
Honestly, a lot of it has helped me with like playing Dungeons and Dragons and LARP. I started off my first
D&D rocks, man.
I started off doing World of Darkness LARP when I was 18, and they build this sheet and they're like, what's your character's motivation? What is their nature? What is, like, when it comes down to the wire, what like makes them go on, or what motivates them to be the way they are? And so every time I have a character, I still like I'm like, okay, what is the thing that like drives them, or what's the thing that's going to keep them going?
And you've always done this then since that time, or is this kind of a new development?
More of a I think probably since I joined the Sanctum, because I joined the writing site that we're on shortly after another one closed down. And until then, I really didn't have anything that lasted. But in role-playing, in LARP and stuff, you have to think like, okay, my character has flaws. What are their flaws? Because no one's perfect. Like, I've never met a perfect person in my life.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, what's wrong with this person? Let's figure this out too while we're working on it. So figuring out their flaws and making sure you stick to those flaws as you write and not like gloss over them, I think helps.
How long have you been writing?
I started writing, I think, when I was like 15 or 16. I started writing Naruto fan fiction, and it's just kind of gone on from there.
Cool. And have you been a member of the Writer's Sanctum for very long?
I think I've been a member, let me check, for I think like 4 years. I joined in 2019.
Very
so
cool.
3 years.
And what would you, when it comes to the Writer's Sanctum, what would you say to somebody thinking about joining or wanting to take a closer look at it and see what it's about?
I think anybody that I've met there that has stuck around has been great. Most people are very welcoming. Of course, you're going to get some people you might not mesh well with, because obviously no one has personalities that always get along together. But overall, everyone's really friendly, they're welcoming, and I've never really had any big issues with people. I love reading stuff that other people write, and it's just really cool being able to like see what other people are writing as well, because I mean, even if like you don't write with that person, it's still just different people, different experiences.
Oh yeah, that's my game, man. I use the forums as a library of unfinished books. I can't count the number of stories I'll spend reading every week. Just countless. I used to like them as I read them, but I started noticing that people would either stop their stories shortly after that or start getting nervous and change things around. So I was like, maybe, you know, I shouldn't be liking these stories and letting them know that they have an active audience. And let's see, where were we? Yeah, here we go. Are there things in your history that you have written that in retrospect you wish you could go back and maybe add more context to?
And our a different story.
Whatever you feel like.
I think, as far as other stories, I don't have anything that's actually truly finished. I think there are things where if I could go back, I would maybe flesh out the character earlier, because there were a couple where I was like, oh, hey, like, they have this, like, one personality trait that's been driving them the whole time. So I would think, especially with my older stories, like, maybe, like, fleshing them out a little bit earlier before you really get into the things. Because once you hit conflict and you don't have, a well-rounded enough character, you run into difficulties.
Of all the stories to date, is there one story in your line of stories that really stands above the rest? A particular story that you're super proud of?
One, it never ended. But I have one that was about World War II, and I did so much research on it. It was about a German soldier who was from Switzerland. He defected because he wanted to just get into war. He wanted to fight. He thought it was the right thing to, like, just a good thing to do. And my character's from England was a French student and studying in France when the war started, and she became a spy. And these two end up interacting and forming a romance, and his name was Felix, and he was starting to realize, like, hey, maybe this wasn't the right thing to do, but it just never really ended up finishing. It's something that I think I would like to revisit eventually.
That's cool. I do a lot of research with my stories, so I get you. You get invested when you really dive into them. So my next question's a bit long, and this one is, the story that you're writing now, Trafficked, starts in San Diego, California, and when we meet Alexandria, she's closing up the shop, and there's a scene you presented there with some really strong character opinions and viewpoints. And she's tired, she's grumpy, she's a little judgmental. She refers to a person as a douchebag for talking about macro econ, if I'm saying that right. And it just kind of goes from there. And where did you get the inspiration to sort of dive into those feelings and add that level of realism to what you had written? I mean, you could tell just by reading what you had written there that she was tired, that she was, grumpy, that she just finished up work. So, how did you go about framing this scene?
I knew that I had a short amount of time to set things up before we had her transferred somewhere else. So that was one big thing. So I knew I had to, like, make a big impact really fast. And if you've ever worked in the service industry, or if anyone else has worked in the service industry, after a long day of working and you're closing up and you want to go home, someone coming in that door and hearing that door ring just ruins your night. Like, you're just like, please leave. You could love I love my job. I work a summer job as well, and I love my job, and someone will come in 5 minutes before close, and I'm already, like, put everything away, and I'm like, are you kidding? It's worse when it's a guy that you don't like that won't leave you alone.
Okay. I'll have to take your word for it, but it came off, to me, when I read that scene, it came off really strong, very realistic. Like, you could imagine that if you had walked into that kind of store and encountered this person, you could kind of just feel what she was putting out, the way you had written it all out. And I just found that really powerful for what it was. So, my next question. Later, when the situation kind of flips around and she gets captured and she gets, trafficked into this ring, you kind of go into detail about her confusion, her fear, and how she's behaving. And at one point, to quote you, her hands were trembling as she hugged her body tightly. And let's see. Hold on, I'll read it eventually. Her hands trembling as she hugged her body tightly, as if she could somehow protect herself from the men with guns. And these kind of powerful statements continued to flow during this entire scene. But one of the things I found really fascinating about all of this is the real fear that you are able to represent in what you've written, and like you can feel the intensity of that scene really, really powerfully. How do you go about adding that level of emotion and fear? What's your mindset in order to get in there? Because I take it you haven't experienced something like this yourself, so where's this depth coming from?
Not particular. Obviously I've never experienced anything like this. I've had panic attacks before, and like just there's like certain things that some people do, and like or if you watch a horror movie and like you feel that pit in your stomach, you feel like your stomach twisting as you're like anticipating that fear, and things like that. That's how I kind of draw on it. I'm like, okay, what do I feel when I'm scared? What do I feel when I'm anxious, or so like anxious like I'm gonna throw up? And so I try to draw on some of that as well, or how other people have described how they feel.
Okay, that's cool. Who are some of your favorite authors? Who inspired you to start writing in the first place?
Favorite authors, and it sounds kind of cliche, but it's one of my favorite authors is Stephen King. He does a very good job at really building in that world, especially in the stories that take place in like the smaller towns, where like for example in It, like at first it seems like, okay, well this is just weird stuff's happening, and then you go like deeper into it, and he does a good job at building this world and being like, okay, why are things the way they are? What are you not seeing? And other people that I have, like, I grew up reading a lot of Harry Potter, which, opinions aside, anything that like fantasy driven, I read a lot of as a kid, and then I moved on growing up into reading horror. So I read a lot of Stephen King. I don't really have other favorite authors. Right now I'm reading a book by, they're called Rainbow Rowell. It's called the Simon Snow series. And I'm actually going to be doing that for my YouTube channel with my roommate.
Very cool.
This summer.
Very cool. I've never been a fan of Stephen King, honestly. I just I find him to be quite pompous, and I don't like the way he writes. It's almost, to me, when I've read his stuff, especially like Golden Years and his hospital story and stuff, I found him to be very it almost feels like he's antagonizing the reader, like he's intentionally trying to insult them at times with some of the words he uses and the way he phrases things. It makes me want to just strangle him sometimes because he just pisses me off. But I would say if I had some favorite authors, it would be Laurel K. Hamilton inspired me to start writing, Patricia Briggs, Jane Silvers, stuff like that. So I tend to lean pretty heavily towards romance novels and romance stuff. Let's see. What kind of music do you think Alexandria would listen to if she was just chilling out?
She listens, I put that, like, she listens to, like, a lot of, like, modern and pop stuff. I think she'd listen to, like, things like The Weeknd, Tovlo, stuff like that. Like, pop, R&B, nothing really special.
Do you think if you met Alexandria in real life, you would get along with her?
Probably. I think so. I don't think there would, like, be, like, any clashes there. Maybe some of the other characters I wouldn't get along with, but I think I'd get along with her. I think she tries to get along with everybody at first, so.
One of the things that you have established here in this story is a world thread for, like, quick references and details about locations and characters and side plot characters and so forth. And it's been an impressive amount of detail that's gone into this. And I noticed that you even posted Alexandria's family on there, and there was a lot of detail with those as well. Have you found yourself finding the world thread helpful or useful? Do you reference it when writing?
Yes, I do. Especially when I'm trying to write, especially starting when I started writing the NPC, like the side characters in the story. I referenced it a lot because I wrote them way before I introduced them. So I was like, okay, let me make sure I have all this right. As well as referencing like her rules, what the house looks like, just things to make sure like I can be like, okay, I'm like doing this consistently. Because a thing that like I struggle with if I don't have references is like being consistent.
Right, and I've always found world threads to be extremely helpful as well, because like you said, especially when it comes to like rules and details or a place or a person that you've encountered in the past and you want to bring back, you'd have to dive through 20 pages plus of story, and then you have to find the location where they were introduced and start reading through that, where the references, it's just like a quick bam, there it is in your face kind of thing. So I've always found world threads to be super helpful. I reference it constantly.
My oldest story is 132 pages right now on the website, I think, and there was a point where I was like, God, where was this taking place? I need to see what this person looked like.
That's a huge story, because for each page there's like 20 posts or something. Yeah. And each post could be anywhere from 500 words to 10,000. So that's a massive amount of a story, man. Wow, that's probably the biggest story I've heard of.
It's been going for 3 years.
Dang.
So, and I've not gotten very far, let me tell you. It's gonna be the size of a George R.R. Martin novel by the time I'm done.
When we're speaking of supporting characters and stand-in casts taking place in the story, is there anyone aside from the main protagonist that you're particularly drawn to in this story?
Like a lot of the side characters, even the ones that like aren't supposed to be good guys. Like back when we had Hobbs, I loved Hobbs. And there's other I really like Stacy. Stacy and Steve are pretty funny if you put them in the same room.
Yeah, well, there's strong personality conflicts there. So, Steve is your typical jock. You're, kind of a chauvinist and very vain character. And then you've got Stacy, who's this super tiny woman, who's all into her games. She's open to the whole world. She kind of thinks that sexuality is being expressed in sort of everything that's being done, whether it's a video game or a movie or a Disney show. It's in everything, in her opinion. So I like those two characters as well. Let's see. Everyone has sort of a process that they do when they're preparing. We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but where you put on playlist for each character that you're about to write with and stuff like that. How about any visual assistance or, looking up like locations and so forth? Anything like that?
Depends on the location. For if it's like a specific setting where I'm trying to be able to visualize it, yes. Otherwise, like in my own like comfort of my like house, to be able to prepare to write, I need absolute I'll get into the mood to get into a story, and then I want absolute silence as I write. Like any noise whatsoever I cannot handle, and because it'll distract me. I get way too distracted. So like anything visual, like if I need anything at all, I'll put on like lo-fi music and like some static thing on my computer, because I have a 3-monitor setup. So like I'll put like something just like a visualizer where I don't really have to pay attention to it, but it's just soothing, so it helps me get into that space to write.
I've always done a lot of research, probably more than I need to. For example, in the traffic story, after the situation where Alexandria was trafficked, she ended up in Florence with the second protagonist, which is Marco. And I've never been to Florence, so I've done lots and lots of research. Google Maps, where I jump into street view so that I can kind of see what the people are dressed like and what the streets look like and stuff like that. I'm a very, very big reference guy, so I do a lot of research, and because of that, it takes me a long time to write, unfortunately.
For some of my stories, like for my thief story, the longest story I've ever had is called To Catch a Thief, and it's set in Victorian England. Actually, like, some things I've watched to be able to get into that, like I watched Downton Abbey just because I was like, okay, what is there that I can watch to like help me like visualize this world? And other things, like with my World War II story, I just watched a lot of World War II documentaries.
If your story was made into a movie, who do you believe would be the best person to represent your protagonist?
Oh, I have no idea. Honestly, I can't, like, it would take me some time to think. I'm not really good at, like, naming, like, actresses and, like, celebrities off the top of my head.
I think somebody that could play Marco really well would be, like, Antonio Banderas. I think he could pull that off. Yeah, he could pull that off really well.
That's kind of the accent I know he's supposed to be Italian, but I imagine the Antonio Banderas accent, and I'm like,
yeah,
he's Spanish, but
it works though, right?
Yeah, it does.
Do you read books? And if you do read books, what kind do you prefer? Like ebooks, audiobooks, printed books?
I like audiobooks. I prefer audio plays if I do it that way. For books, I actually read a lot of nonfiction, which is why it's hard for me to pick favorite authors. Because I used to read a lot, and like the older I got, I have less time, so I have less time to dedicate to stuff. And so when I read, I actually like reading like nonfiction. I like reading autobiographies or biographies of people that I like, or like bands and that I listen to, or people that have had experiences that I want to hear about, because it's just I have so much time to deal with, like to be able to do things, and so I go towards a lot of nonfiction, or if I do want to do fiction, I usually go with audio plays or audiobooks.
Very cool. Let's see. Are you the only writer in your family, or is it, there are others that write as well?
In my household, my roommate also writes. So they are writing a children's story about our cats, and I'm going to be doing the art for that, but outside of
you're
that,
an artist.
I do a little bit of art. I'm not like Alex. Like, Alex is like really good at art. I do like some basic stuff, and when it comes to like children's books, like I'm doing watercolors, and that's pretty like simple to be able to do, because it's going to be a very simplistic style.
Okay. What kind of advice would you give if anybody was inspired to start writing, especially if they were going to write something like you've stepped into here, which is sort of a fetish, erotic horror story? What kind of advice would you give to people that want to step into something like that?
For people that haven't written before at all and say they want to write, just do it. The only way to get better is to be able to just continually practice and hammer it out, I think. So the big part is just start writing. It could be about anything, because even if you don't finish that, you could get other ideas later and improve upon the foundation that you started when you first started writing. When it comes to something like this, I think an important part is to be able to balance it, because anything that's going to be only fetish and not safe for work stuff is going to fizzle out after a while and not have any momentum to carry. So you need to make sure you have a baseline plot as well, in addition to whatever you're trying to do.
I agree completely. That's solid, man. What would you say your favorite part so far in this story has been?
Favorite part? I think the dinner that Alex had with Marco before she signed that contract, because besides like that last little night of freedom, it gave her like some sort of like aspect of control that she was lacking for a while, especially in that start of that story.
Yeah.
And I think that was important to establish before she entered that sort of relationship that she has with him now.
And this has been a really intense story. I know we didn't do a very good job of describing what this story is about, but really it's about a young woman who's struggling with life. You know, she's going to work daily. Her mom's not doing well. Her sister's struggling in school. She's got all this drama, and then she gets kind of lured in by an old friend and trafficked, and it's not pretty. It's not fun. She's trafficked into a ring. She's taken through the whole process, which I thought was really disturbing to do research on and try to find out these stories. And I listened to quite a bit of survivor stories regarding this to get a better grasp of just how horrific it could be. And then you know, she's sold on an auction block, and she's sold to the main villain of the story in this arc that we are in, which is the Bones arc. And he's a bad dude. What did you think of Bones?
Hate him. I am usually able to at least like or sympathize with a villain. Like Andrew, like for example, Andrew, he's kind of antagonistic, but like there's parts of him that I'm like, you know, like as a character, I like this character, but I hate Bones so much.
He's such a bad guy, right? Like there's just
there's nothing good about this guy. And like he makes the other bad people look good by comparison. Like
yeah,
when you deal with this dude, you're like, you know, maybe a day with Andrew's not so bad.
And then from her captivity of Bones and dealing with this horrific experience that she has to deal with this mass murderer that captured her and has just constantly abused her, she's kind of rescued, or it would seem she's rescued at first, and taken by Marco. And right away, you know, the whole concept that she's just been saved, she's been rescued from this horrible environment, gets shot up in smoke when he's like, I didn't save you. You know what I mean? And how did you do with that scene?
So I had complicated feelings about the scene, because like as on the outside, it's like it's just kind of sad that you just kind of want to laugh a little bit. Like it's like, oh, this is like insane, but it's also like, man, like that like woo, that hope's crushing. Like you could hear like that, like
right. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty extreme.
And I think like the way I tried to describe that, so she's like, well, fuck, like.
I thought it came off really well. I thought it came off as a hope-crushing despair of just, oh my god, you know, I was just kidnapped from a trafficker to be ransomed back to that trafficker so that they can get more money. It was just a really defeated moment for Alex, right? And that,
and I think you can like kind of tell, like when she starts having that, like, you know what, like I'm fucked either way, like. And so, like, that's when you start seeing a little bit more of her personality coming out after, like, dealing with all that stuff with Bones.
And from there, we kind of stepped into the romance aspect of the story, where, you know, Marco is starting to develop feelings, and he's not understanding, and he's drawn to her. And we also kind of bring in fetish. And for those of you that are not aware, this is a very BDSM-heavy fetish story. Mixed with horror and thriller and stuff like that. And if you haven't written this before, you've got some bad examples out there, right? Like a lot of people would say that, you know, 50 Shades of Grey is a good example. It's not a good example. In fact, he openly says in book 2 that this is not what he does, that he's not a dominant, that he's a sadist, and that they're different. And that helps progress the story so that you're no longer judging it based on something that it is not. But the problem that I found with 50 Shades is that you really have to get to book 2 to realize that this is not some twisted, broken, goofy form of BDSM. And if you look it up online today about writing it, that is still one of the #1 books, is 50 Shades of Grey will come up. And even the author came out and said that is not what they were writing. So it was just kind of a thing. But how could you justify Alexandria stepping into that after everything she's experienced? What kind of goes through her mindset in that she's willing to accept this kind of extreme lifestyle after just being trafficked and accepted?
One, like, as a comparison, is Marco and Bones are like night and day when it comes to the treatment. Because even though, like, they had that little scene in the bathroom where it was a little, like, iffy, well, it wasn't even, like, iffy, but he didn't touch her sexually.
Right.
But, that kind of, like, because he made it feel good. So, going through that months of trauma, and then before that, she wasn't even very experienced. Like, she had experiences, but they weren't that great, like, or they were just mediocre. So, going through that scene in the bathroom, and then him being nicer to her, it's a very big comparison to even how men have treated her whole life.
Right. It doesn't hurt that he's a millionaire either, right?
And when you have a millionaire throwing money at you, I bet it changed a lot of, like, I made the joke with you before, not on the interview. I'm like, you know what? After all that, like, when he's hot, when he has a bunch of money, and when the sex is good, you start to like, ignore a lot of red flags.
So from there, it kind of begins to spiral a little bit with he's flipping his life upside down. He's flipping his plans around. He's telling Andrew, which is one of his best friends who was a mercenary with him in when he served, and he's telling them the plans have changed. We're not going to ransom Alexandria back. We're not going to do this. She's mine now, kind of thing. And it gets very possessive and dominant and has that whole thing going on. But how would you say Alexandria has interpreted all these changes made in her respect up to that point?
She thinks he's protecting her, because it goes from him being like, I mean, when they first meet, he's like, I didn't rescue you. I'm not your friend. This isn't a field trip. And she goes from being essentially a prisoner to, like, a pampered pet. Like, so, he goes from that to her having her family come, to being able to have a lot more freedom. It feels like she's kind of making friends, almost. So, I think she views it more as like, oh, he's being protective, he's caring about me, rather than, like, maybe some of the possessiveness that he's having. So as the story goes on,
there's a lot of that possessiveness, right? Like, he tagged her. She's got a tracker in her, a GPS. And you know where I got the idea for that was I watch a lot of different shows with my wife, and one of the shows she watches is NCIS. And there's a trafficking episode there, and one of the aspects in that show is that they're putting trackers underneath the left armpit. And so I looked up to see if that was real, if that was actually a thing, and it is. So that's why he did that. And so there is a lot of possessiveness, but yeah, it seems like she's kind of looked past that. So,
well, he can keep me away from this monster. Like, the tracker seems a little bit more justified in her mind. Like, she's not, oh, he's just looking to stalk me. He's trying to protect me.
There are a lot of, like, subplots going on as well, right? So right now, and we're kind of nearing the end of our interview. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask them. Right now, we have a lot of things. We have some crazy mercenaries watching the estate, and they kind of warned Marco, if her or her friend come around us, you you can't expect us to just stay calm. We're not going to. You've filled your home with beautiful women, and you filled your yard with monsters. So you can't expect us to get along nicely. And then we have Bones, the Bones arc, which is the main plot. We have her family came down, right? And they're living in Florence now. We have her friend Kayla, who's been given this like job of a lifetime. And, you know, we have all these subplots going on. Has at any time any of this felt overwhelming to you?
No, especially when I was making the NPCs. Like, I knew there were going to be subplots. I was hoping for them because it helps add depth to a story. And so I was coming up with ideas about how these characters would interact with one another as I was building the characters, and how they could potentially deal with and add conflict. Like, Kayla's very, like, fly by the seat of her pants, I'm going to do what I want type of person that doesn't really think about consequences. So I think she's going to help a lot with the subplots and help push some things a little bit.
I look forward to it. That's going to be interesting. All right. Well, we're kind of reaching the end of our interview. If you guys are interested in this story, it's called Trafficked. You can find it on the Inner Sanctum. There are some links in the description. You will also find links to CharlieKitty's Twitch. Tell us a little bit more about your Twitch. What do you stream?
I have been doing a lot of dungeon crawler called Boyfriend Dungeon, where you move to a new town, you level up your swords, and you get to date your swords. So that's fun. I also play a lot of RPGs and anime-based games, and basically whatever I'm feeling at the time. So
very cool. All right. Well, you know, that kind of is everything. Is there anything that you wanted to say? Any shout outs you want to give, or anything you want to add that wasn't addressed?
Nope. Read the story if you like it. If you have any questions, you could feel free to ask us. We might answer them, or you might have to wait for another interview.
Yes, there will be a follow-up interview as the story progresses and gets into the next story arc. As we conclude with the Bones story arc, you know, we'll pick up a new arc. And if you're interested in seeing how the Bones story arc is going to end and what's going to happen, you know, definitely check out the story. You can find it on Inner Sanctum. There's some links in the description, and it's a very welcoming community. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. Thank you for joining me today, CharlieKitty. This was a lot of fun. And I will see you guys all next time. You know, I don't stream so much anymore. I don't do my games so much and stuff like that. I just needed a break for a little while, but it seems like things are running pretty well. So maybe I'll start streaming again. We'll see. Thank you, everybody. Oh, and one more thing. If you guys are interested in being interviewed and you would like me to do an interview with you or your co-author, you know, hit me up. I'd be happy to throw some Inner Sanctum interviews out there for everybody to take part. I'd need to read your story, so make sure you give me some notice. If I'm not part of your story, then I need to read it. And you need to make sure that you have permission from both yourself and the co-author. It cannot just be a one-sided thing. The co-author has to agree that the story can be discussed you know, publicly, and I'd be happy to interview you. So, you know, give me a shout out, send me an email, send me a private message, and we'll talk about it. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.